My knuckles went wide against the steering wheel. It wasn't even dinner time, and already the school parking lot was nearly empty. Sarah always prided herself on lesson prep, those extra hours ensuring her students got the best. But lately, those long afternoons seemed to bleed into late evenings more often than not. Faculty workshop, she'd said this morning, a touch too bright. My cop brain buzzed, the part of me I couldn't switch off even when relaxing with my wife. Was it naive to trust her? We'd been together since college, built a life of comfortable routines and shared dreams. But a routine can be faked. Dreams can change. Eyes scanning the emptying lot, I spotted her car. Relief should have hit, but instead, a sour unease rose in my throat. She was talking to someone, a man, tall, with a laugh that seemed too easy for a professional setting. I couldn't make out his face at this distance. Didn't need to. The way he leaned in, the touch on her arm as they laughed, something in me instinctively recoiled. Think, man, think. Nothing concrete yet, I scolded myself. Yet, the way she smiled at him, unguarded, so unlike the half-smiles she aimed at me lately. A low hum of dread throbbed at the base of my skull. She turned, saw my car, and the smile faltered ever so slightly. Her colleague, if that's what he was, nodded a curt goodbye. Sarah hurried over, slipping into the passenger seat with a breathless, "Sorry, ran longer than I thought." I forced a casual tone. Meeting drag out? Just some curriculum debates. Tedious, she sighed, but her fingers fiddled with her phone. That damn phone, glued to her hand like an extra limb lately. You okay? I asked, studying her. Makeup a touch heavier than usual, a new floral scent I couldn't quite place. She seemed brighter, somehow. And nervous under it, maybe. Fine. Just tired. Sarah pulled at her hair, avoiding my eyes. Can we grab takeout? I'm wiped. The drive home thrummed with unspoken tension. I wanted to blurt out questions. Who was that guy? Why the extra hours, the secretive phone calls, the shift in her whole demeanor? But if I was wrong? I couldn't bear the look I knew I'd see in her eyes. Disappointment that I didn't trust her. We ate in front of the TV, her tapping away at her phone even during commercials. Once, I would have teased her about it. Now, it was an icy knot in my gut. Early night, my attempt at normalcy sounded hollow. Headache, she mumbled, barely looking up. As Sarah disappeared into our bedroom, the little cop voice in my head screamed it was a lie. But the bigger part of me, the husband part, whispered a desperate prayer, please let me be wrong. The clock glared back at me, 2:13 a.m., outside our bedroom door, the faint rhythmic tapping of Sarah's laptop keyboard and a muffled murmur of her voice cut through the silence. Why the late-night work session? The school wouldn't be emailing curriculum changes at this hour. A knees crawled up my spine. I'd tried to let it go, to convince myself the scent of unfamiliar cologne on her jacket was some random student's, not another man's. But now. Getting up, I padded to the study under the guise of grabbing a glass of water. As I passed her open laptop, the screen flashed, and not with spreadsheets or lesson plans. A private chat window flickered before being hastily minimized. My heart sank. I should have confronted her right then. Demanded an explanation. That's the cop way, direct, unafraid of the truth. But the fear of what that truth might be clenched in my gut. Days blurred into a haze of hyper-awareness. I catalogued every lingering glance at her phone, every whispered call she took in the other room. And the guilt ate at me, hot and bitter. I'd never been the snooping type. We'd built our marriage on honesty, on the kind of trust I'd sworn I could spot in a suspect a mile away. Yet, here I was, sinking to those same shadowy tactics. Just a quick check, I lied to myself when the opportunity to glance at her laptop arose again. Cleared web history, nothing earth-shattering. My heart pounded both in relief and a fresh spike of dread. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Until the lunchtime surprise, I impulsively sprung on her. Sarah's car wasn't in the familiar spot at her school. Curriculum meeting ran long, she'd said that morning. So where was she? I enabled the "They Find My Phone" feature on her phone, hands shaking. Risky, I knew, an invasion of privacy that could break what was left of our marriage if she ever found out. That afternoon, a notification pinged, a gym across town. Sarah, the woman who hated gym class in high school, working out in the middle of the day. Cold certainty settled over me. Sleep became my enemy. Each time I thought I was drifting off, her late-night typing would snap me awake. We moved through our days in a strange, brittle choreography, forced smiles and hollow small talk. I was both the investigator meticulously building his case, and the desperate fool hoping it would all somehow crumble apart, proving me laughably wrong. I rehearsed the words all afternoon. Not an interrogation, just a simple question. Sarah, are the long hours, the secrecy, is there something else going on? The goal was to keep my voice calm, a concerned husband asking, not a detective ready to pounce. Yet, the moment she stepped through the door that evening, the facade crumbled. There was a new energy in her, a vibrancy that had been missing for weeks. It should have brought relief, but instead, it sent a tremor of dread through me. That spark had never been for me lately. Over dinner, I tried. Those meetings going okay? You seem different, I ventured. The fork in her hand clattered. Different how? The wariness in her tone was sharper than I'd ever heard it. Just happier, more relaxed. I chose the words carefully, a minefield with each syllable. Sarah set her utensils down, the smile brittle. So now it's a problem that I'm not stressed out? Maybe that's what years of marriage does to a woman, she finally learns to let go a little. The accusation stung. Our marriage, was it always this fragile, just waiting for one harsh wind to crack it? I took a deep breath, pushing down anger mixed with shame. It wasn't the marriage at fault, not entirely. Honey, it's the other stuff too. The late nights, the phone hiding. I couldn't bring myself to say more. Her eyes hardened. Oh, so now I'm hiding things? You think I'm lying? I didn't say that, I backpedaled. I'm just asking. She slammed her napkin down. You're asking nothing, you've made up your mind. You're spying on me, judging me. God, I thought we were better than this. And there it was, the stone wall up. No amount of gentle prodding would break through that now. Days bled into a tense, silent battle of wills. I slept on the couch, feeling like an exile in my own home. Then came the girls' night out. Sarah announced it breezily, almost a taunt. Me and Lisa finally getting drinks, been forever. She deserved time with friends, I told myself. But after so many lies, large and small, the rational part of my brain wasn't in control. Desperation fueled a terrible decision. As they drove off, I tailed them. Not in a police car, thank God for small mercies, but in my aging Honda. And it was pathetically easy. They never turned to check if they were followed, as though the idea their little secret could be threatened never crossed their minds. The bar they mentioned turned out to be a lie. Instead, I saw Sarah's car pull into the parking lot of a fancy little restaurant, the kind of place we'd only gone for anniversaries. And then, my vision tunneled. Emerging from the car with a laugh, Sarah was linked arm in arm with a man. The same one I'd seen her with at the school. The world tilted sideways. I saw them through the restaurant window, bathed in warm light. They were close, heads lowered, smiles intimate. Every cop instinct screamed at me. That wasn't the body language of friends. Rage, red and blinding, warred with a crushing sense of defeat. The evidence against her was damning. The evidence against myself even more so. Who had I become, sneaking around, doubting the person I'd sworn my life to? That night, I didn't go home. I drove until the tank was empty, the truth raw and festering inside me. The sunrise was a mockery, painting the room in cheerful pinks when my soul felt like a storm-ravaged wasteland. Sleep was a lost cause. Betrayal buzzed like a swarm of wasps in my head, the image of Sarah and him burned onto my retinas. Yet, underneath the white-hot rage churned an almost unbearable twist of love, the memory of better days refusing to be completely choked out. Then, a switch flipped. Amidst the chaos, a cold clarity descended. There was that cop part of me, the one trained to compartmentalize, to see a case without emotional baggage. It wasn't a healthy response, but a survival one. This wasn't just about a failing marriage. It was a crime. She'd lied, manipulated, broken the law. My routine turned chillingly methodical. Evidence was my salvation. I began with the small things. Photographing receipts showing fancy dinners, hotel charges dated to nights she was supposedly working late. Discreetly checking her phone at night, I found texts dirty but not truly gone, filled with endearments I'd never heard in years. The real breakthrough came, ironically, from an unexpected source. Lisa. Sarah's best friend, always kind to me, was a mess of guilt. A stray remark about a fancy new spa Sarah was raving about was all I needed to dig. That spa turned out to be a couple's only resort. More photos, more damning evidence. Who the hell was this guy? I used every resource I had, connections built over cautious years as a cop. Mark, the name finally surfaced. Local businessman, the kind who donated to charities and kissed babies for PR. Public records told me little, but it was a starting point. The lines blurred horribly. This wasn't detective work anymore, but a desperate man digging for anything to justify the cold fury within him. I unearthed Mark's business dealings, shady rumors that hadn't stuck yet. I clung to those slivers of darkness, desperate to prove to myself I wasn't just the jealous husband, that this affair had roots deeper than a midlife fling. At home, the game changed. I mirrored Sarah's growing distance, but with a chilling difference. Mine was a performance. Every polite smile, every detached, "How was your day?" was a mask. My purpose was singular. This wasn't ending with a tearful argument. This was a case being built, one piece of evidence at a time. My hand trembled as I packed Sarah's suitcase for the work conference. Each neatly folded blouse was a mockery. Her excited chatter about workshops and networking events made my stomach churn. This wasn't about career advancement, it was a romantic getaway masquerading as a professional obligation. "You sure you don't want to fly with me?" "It's a lovely resort," she'd said, and the forced innocence in her voice had nearly made me snap. Instead, I faked enthusiasm. "Nah, you deserve some me time. I'll catch up on some paperwork." A bitter laugh echoed in my head, how fitting that my lie was nearly the truth. I had paperwork to prepare, just a much more devastating kind. The drive to the airport was a blur. Not in the hot-headed, reckless way, but with the eerie calm of someone carrying out a plan meticulously laid out weeks ago. I watched her disappear into the terminal, the oblivious bounce in her step grating on my nerves. This time I'd anticipated the play, it was my turn to direct it. Tailing her was disgustingly simple. It turned out I wasn't the scorned husband playing detective, I was the detective playing the scorned husband. There was a grim comfort in that. The secluded hotel wasn't a place I'd recognize, the kind with private balconies and discreet room service. Seeing her emerge into the lobby, no luggage except a small overnight bag, was confirmation enough. Yet it was the sight of him, waiting with a smirk and a too-tight embrace, that made something raw and furious tear itself loose in me. I snapped photos from a distance. Their body language, the way she glowed in his presence, it was more sickeningly incriminating than any hotel registry. And just to be sure, I took a risk. Slipping a tracker, no bigger than a coin, into her purse when the opportunity arose. Desperate times, desperate measures. My final gambit wasn't in my police playbook. It was a shot in the dark. Cornering Lisa was a low blow, but I was past caring. Leveraging that once warm friendship made me despise myself a little more, but the look in Lisa's eyes, the way she wilted under gentle pressure, it cracked the case wide open. Lisa broke down, tears and apologies spilling out. Guilt had been eating her alive. She told me everything: the fancy dinners I already knew about, the spa weekend I didn't, and worst of all, hints of Mark's true nature. Not some hapless guy seduced by Sarah, but a player, a user. That little detail ignited a new spark of protective fury. The next few days I moved like a machine, fueled by rage, by the need to finish this. Sarah returned from her conference, smug and relaxed, but even I, now so well attuned to her micro-expressions, could spot the undercurrent of nerves. The trap was set, all that was left was to wait for her to trip into it. Sarah's arrival home was a performance worthy of an audience we both knew didn't exist. She breezed in, a whirlwind of fake apologies for the crazy busy conference and forced cheeriness that set my teeth on edge. I played my own part flawlessly, the doting, slightly oblivious husband, relief masking the cold loathing beneath. My revenge was a marathon, not a sprint. While she prattled on about networking successes, I was already miles ahead. There was the ruthless divorce lawyer, a woman known as the Barracuda, whose eyes gleamed as she saw the potential ruin this case held. There were quiet phone calls to trusted financial advisors, shifting assets, ensuring that when the dust settled, I wouldn't be walking away with just a broken heart. The waiting was the hardest. I longed for the catharsis of a showdown, to shove the photos in Sarah's face, watch her facade crumble. But that was the impulsive husband in me, the one I fought to control. The strategist knew that true devastation was a slow burn. Lisa became my unlikely weapon. Her guilt transformed into a desperate need to help in some way, a twisted kind of penance. Through her, I monitored Sarah's every move, piecing together details no photo could capture. The nervous phone calls, the way her newfound energy vanished when she thought she was alone. And from Lisa came the revelation about Mark. His squeaky clean image was a facade, it turned out. A desperate side deal, a risky investment, perfect leverage. My old contacts, people who owed me favors, received carefully anonymous tips about it. Vultures circled, sensing opportunity. Mark would be too busy dodging his own disaster to play the carefree lover for long. News reports became my twisted entertainment. Headlines about shady dealings in businesses with ties to Mark. The net tightened around him, and by extension, around Sarah. Her manufactured sheer started to slip. The confident woman from her work trip was replaced by an anxious, haunted version. One evening, as Sarah frantically typed on her phone, the rage nearly overwhelmed me. The urge to snatch the device, demand the truth, it took every ounce of control not to explode. But in that restraint, there was a chilling satisfaction. She'd once accused me of turning cold. I'd become something far more dangerous, a man with ice in his veins and a meticulously planned path of destruction laid out at his feet. The knock on Mark's office door wasn't mine, but it might as well have been. News footage of the scene painted the picture vividly enough. Harried cops, stacks of paperwork carted off, the panic blur of his face being shoved into a police cruiser. It was the culmination of weeks of meticulous orchestration, and damn, did it feel good. Sarah, of course, was in full panic mode. She tried to hide it, but I'd memorized every tell in her by now. Questions laced with thinly veiled fear about Mark's troubles were dismissed with my feigned ignorance. Must be a ruthless competitor, I'd shrug, a touch too innocent. It was torture, playing dumb, but the payoff, that was coming. That morning, the final piece of my plan fell into place. Leaving for work, I accidentally left the TV on, the news blaring about the raid. Sarah's sharp intake of breath was music to my ears. Let her stew in that all day. Let doubt and terror consume her. The confrontation was inevitable, she cornered me that night the minute I stepped through the door. Tears, then accusations that grew in fury as her veneer of control finally cracked. My silence was a weapon now, letting her hurl questions and plead for my belief in her innocence fueled the exquisite fire of my revenge. And then came the confession, not freely given, but dragged out through choked sobs. The affair, the lies. It was all there, tainted by the desperation of a woman whose world was crumbling. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, an odd hollowness crept in. This wasn't a victory for the old me, the man who'd valued honesty above all else. But I couldn't stop now. The photos, Sarah, my voice was cold, the hotel, the tracker on your car. Each piece of evidence I laid out was like a hammer blow. Lisa's betrayal, a detail I dropped as coldly as possible, was the crushing finale. The shift in the air was palpable. No more tears, no more fury, just a shattered Sarah staring at me with something akin to horror. The woman who'd kept secrets, manipulated my love, now saw the depths of my revenge. Here, in this broken marriage, the power balance had irrevocably flipped. How could you? She choked out, and it struck me as profoundly sad that it was the only question left for her to ask. How could I? Maybe because the good, trusting man I'd been was already dead, murdered by her lies and replaced by someone far more ruthless. Her betrayal had forged me into something just as monstrous as her. And that, perhaps, was the greatest tragedy of all. The divorce papers landed on the table between us with a soft thud, yet echoed deafeningly loud in the tense aftermath of her confession. Weeks of meticulous preparation by the Barracuda meant they weren't just a threat, they were a meticulously crafted death sentence to our marriage. Sign them, I told Sarah, my voice devoid of any inflection. Her eyes flicked over the terms. No alimony, a vicious split of assets heavily tilted in my favor, even a carefully worded clause hinting at the potential for further legal trouble if she contested. It was cruel, and a part of me, the part one didn't like to acknowledge, reveled in it. She, who sought to take both my love and my financial stability, would walk away with nothing but a shattered reputation and a mountain of regret. The full devastation of Mark's downfall became public knowledge. Illicit deals, financial ruin, the kind of scandal that made front-page news. Sarah, already reeling from my blow, now seemed to shrink further. Their affair, once fueled by stolen excitement, was exposed as seedy, built on lies and self-serving greed on both their parts. Then, the unexpected twist. An envelope, plain and unassuming, with Lisa's handwriting scrawled on it. Inside wasn't an excuse, but an apology. Messy, guilt-ridden, and surprisingly honest. She owned up to her cowardice, begged for a sliver of forgiveness she didn't deserve. It was a small, inadequate thing, given the pain she'd helped inflict, but a sliver nonetheless. pen_spark. In our small town, the whispers were relentless. The scandal had a teacher, the sordid affair. Judgment hung heavy in the air, isolating Sarah further. She went from the vibrant woman I'd fallen in love with to a pale shadow, skittish and haunted. Part of me flinched. Had I gone too far? But that part was swiftly silenced. Mercy was a luxury she hadn't afforded me. The grocery store encounter months later was inevitable. I saw her first, thin, harried, a far cry from the polished woman who'd once shopped with such confidence. Our eyes met, and for a frozen moment, I saw raw pain mirrored in hers. Then, pride, or perhaps shame, hardened her features. We passed each other wordlessly, strangers bound by a toxic history neither of us could truly escape. My life moved on, at least superficially. Cautious dates, awkward first conversations where the shadow of Sarah lurked unspoken. Rebuilding trust felt like walking on broken glass. I was hyper-aware of every potential lie, every flicker of insincerity. The town hummed with gossip. Was I a merciless monster, or the wrong victor? Some pitied Sarah, a woman led astray. Others whispered of karma, the cheater finally getting her due. I hated that the narrative was out of my hands, that Sarah's humiliation was now a twisted form of entertainment, but I'd set the wheels in motion. I couldn't stop them now, even if I wanted to. The hum of my beat-up old Honda had become a soothing rhythm, a comforting counterpoint to the storm that had wrecked my life. The police cruiser said and used more often these days. Solo patrols, the constant chatter of the radio. They were reminders of everything that had unraveled. Instead, I drove these familiar streets with a new kind of focus, the anonymity of my personal car offering a sliver of respite from curious stares and hushed gossip. Life, in some twisted way, moved forward. My career surged, not out of some healthy ambition but from a gnawing need to fill the void Sarah had left. Investigations that once felt routine took on a sharper edge, an almost obsessive attention to detail born from my newfound distrust of appearances. I built an icy reputation, fair but utterly unforgiving. But peace? That was elusive. It gnawed at me that even shattered, even shamed, Sarah might find some twisted version of it eventually. Her pain no longer fueled me, just left a lingering hollowness. It was an anonymous blog post that thrust the whole rotten tale back into the spotlight. Names changed. Details fictionalized just enough, yet the story was unmistakable. The cheating wife, the cop's revenge. It went viral with shocking speed, that twisted sort of guilty pleasure the internet seemed to thrive on. The comments were a battlefield. Strangers dissected my actions, arguing over whether I was a vigilante hero or a soulless monster. Messages flooded in. Some from betrayed spouses, their pain raw and reaching out for twisted inspiration. Others darkly congratulatory. Some even vicious, condemning me for stooping to Sarah and Mark's level. The cop husband who got revenge. The label clung to me, a bizarre kind of fame thrust upon someone who valued privacy above all else. Yet, a twisted part of me reveled in it. I'd destroyed Sarah's reputation through calculated action, not spite-fueled social media rants. In the battle for public opinion, it seemed I'd inadvertently gained the upper hand. News outlets picked up the scent. Requests for interviews, disguised promises of telling my side, with sympathetic camera angles. I ignored them all. This wasn't about vindication, it was about picking up the scraps of my shattered life. But as the world watched our twisted morality play unfold, the lines between justice and vengeance grew blurry. The question echoed on restless nights, had I simply become a different flavor of villain? Sarah and Mark's actions were born from selfishness, mine from a cold, methodical need to inflict pain. The result, their ruin, was the same. My cop instincts, once my greatest strength, now felt like a cruel liability. Then came the knock on the door. A woman, nervously clutching a worn purse, eyes wide with a desperate sort of hope. There was a familiar story, cheating husband, suspicions, a plea for help that grated on every cynical nerve I possessed. Part of me wanted to shut the door, to claim exhaustion, to retreat into the carefully rebuilt numbness of my existence. But the detective in me, the part that believed there was good and evil still worth separating, wouldn't be silenced. That part of me was the only scrap of the old me left, and even twisted, it was what might pull me back from her story, in its agonizing details, was both achingly familiar and yet not. There were tears, but also a quiet strength that Sarah had lacked. The husband's lies were clumsier, the desperation different. Still, the echo of my own betrayal roared like a wildfire, threatening to burn away my hard-won resolve. I need to know, she pleaded, and I saw myself in that desperate need to cling to any scrap of truth, even if that truth confirmed the worst. The case became an obsession, just like Sarah once had. Only, this obsession was fueled differently. There was no fury now, no desire for vengeance, but a gnawing need to ensure another person didn't walk blindly into the abyss I'd clawed my way out of. Evenings blurred into late nights spent trawling through bank records, piecing together a timeline from social media posts. The thrill of the hunt was back, but untainted by the poison that had fueled my pursuit of Sarah. This was about helping, about taking the skills I'd honed for destruction and repurposing them. Scandals, like flash floods, eventually fade. The media circus moved on, finding other tales of ruin to feast upon. The cop husband morphed into a half-forgotten internet legend, a cautionary tale for cheating spouses and those tempted by revenge alike. The harder thing was finding peace within myself. Forgiveness, the kind whispered about in well-meaning platitudes, wouldn't come. Perhaps the time for it would, but that wound still festered, a constant reminder of the man I'd become. Instead, I clung to acceptance. Our marriage wasn't some tragedy that wasn't meant to be. It died because of deliberate choices, hers and ultimately, my own retaliatory ones. There was a bleak sort of freedom in owning that. My heart, in turn, learned to be cautious. In the women I dated, I was hyper-aware of those first cracks in a fabricated facade, overly suspicious of kindness that might morph into something else months down the line. Trust was a fragile thing now, requiring far more proof than a few sweet smiles and shared dinners. The legacy of Sarah wasn't just in the wariness, but in a newfound appreciation for brutal honesty. I'd craved the truth, even painful truth, and now offered it readily. Sugarcoating, hiding flaws for the sake of short-term harmony, that path had led only to ruin. Scars, both visible and invisible, were a constant companion. Some days they were just faint lines, others they throbbed like a phantom limb, reminding me of who I once was. Years later, it was of all things. A scent that caught me off guard. A whiff of Sarah's old perfume on a breeze. A floral ghost from a life buried long ago. The surge of anger was startling in its intensity, but beneath it, a melancholy I couldn't deny. Sadness for what had been lost, for what we both had become. Yet, it didn't consume me. It was one emotion among many, a sign of healing, however incomplete. In the quiet moments, the most honest ones, I'd look in the mirror and see a stranger. This grizzled, harder version of myself wasn't the man I'd intended to become. But he was a survivor. Would I wish this crucible on anyone? Absolutely not. But the fire had forged something in me, something I wasn't yet sure I liked, but respected. The road ahead was still uncertain. Loneliness was a lurking shadow, a fear that trust was forever tainted for me. Yet, there was a flicker of hope, not in romantic fairy tales, but in the gritty purpose I found in work, in entangling lies to protect others from a pain I knew all too intimately. And perhaps that, in its own twisted way, was the best I never learned how to hit a curveball. Even when I played college baseball, I tended to sit on pitches and only swung at fastballs. You can tell the difference by the way the seams spin. I was pretty well known as a fastball hitter. That was the end of my professional aspirations. I did get a good education though. This helped me a lot, as after a couple years of playing I probably would have been deflated anyway. A good education always pays off. It certainly did for me. 25 years after graduation and after 15 years of working in my major, I got my dream job. I was a full-time professor with an emancipated chair in the engineering school of a major university in Texas, consulting on major government construction projects and heading one of NIST's manufacturing labs. Tessa and I bought our fancy house in the gated community we'd always dreamed of, and life was throwing me fastballs right down the middle. I was hitting them back to back. Our oldest daughter, Tori, was a junior in high school, attending the same school where I taught and studying civil engineering like her old man. Life was in a vice, and the lights kept going out. And then the curveball appeared. I didn't recognize it at first. I didn't even realize the ball was in play. It came in the form of a call from Tori. "Daddy, what's going on?" she asked. "Oh, nothing much," I replied. "Just sitting on the internet." "What's wrong with you, Dove?" "I stopped by the house to borrow your jack," she said. There was a delivery truck there. I walked in and my mom was there, supervising the movers. She said she was moving out, that you two were having problems and needed to be apart. "Why didn't you say anything?" I was dumbfounded. "Haha, good for you, Tori," I finally managed to mumble. "Daddy, this isn't a joke," she said. "What's going on?" "Jesus, I have no idea," I said. "Are you sure, baby? This isn't a joke?" "Daddy, I'm right here watching. You need to come over here." I don't know what's going on and Mommy won't tell me. Did you do something? That was one hell of a question. I had probably done a lot of something, but I had no idea of any something that would make Tessa go away. I wasn't a perfect husband. I was well aware of all my flaws, but she wasn't a perfect wife either. No one is perfect. I certainly wasn't a cheater. I wasn't a criminal. I didn't gain 300 pounds on myself. And as far as I was concerned, I didn't have horrible body odor. I had arranged for assistants to teach my classes and was speeding all the way home. The truck was parked in the driveway, just like Tori said it would be. She met me on the street. She won't tell me anything, she said. You really don't guess anything? No, honey, I don't guess. She hasn't said a word to me about any trouble. Well, Dad, if you haven't cheated on her or insulted her or talked trash, I've got your back, okay? I promise I haven't done anything even remotely similar, I told her. I sighed. Let's go see if she wants to talk. Are you sure you want to be here? Of course, she said. Dad, I'm going to record this on my phone. Talitha will want to know what happened. Talitha was her little sister and our baby. I gave Tori a quick hug and we headed out to get the lion, so to speak. Tessa was in the living room directing the movers who were loading the hideous living room set that she just couldn't live without. Tessa, what are you doing? I asked. I'm leaving you, Dax, she said. I don't want to argue with you about this. You won't change my mind, you'll only make me angry, and I'll get angry and get nowhere. Well, that's a good speech, Mom, Tori said. I hate to tell you, but I'm already mad. No, I guess I don't hate to tell you this. Unless you want to piss me off completely, I suggest you try to make us both realize what the hell you're letting yourself get away with. Damn, she was pissed. Tori was the sweetest girl on the planet, but as I'd learned over the years, she had quite a temper if she thought she'd been wronged. She hardly ever swore. I could tell Tessa was thinking the same thing. She gave the movers a couple directions and took Tori's hand. Let's go on deck, she said. Tori yanked her hand away, but we followed Tessa onto the deck. She closed the sliding door and seemed to gather her thoughts. I met someone. She finally managed to say it. You don't know him. He moved here from New Mexico about 6 months ago and is in real estate. I'm going to be with him. I can't just cheat, so I'm leaving. I've already filed divorce papers, Dax. Now that's a surprise, I said. You couldn't just cheat, could you? So you met like it was yesterday, fell in love at first sight, and knew right away you were meant for each other, right? Tori snorted. That's right. That's the way it always works. Mom, how stupid do you think we are? I don't think. Tori cut her short. You're a real estate agent, Mom. You don't have to account for your time. How many lame dates, dinners, showings have you had with Romeo? It's not. It was my turn. Yes, it is. You can't just randomly decide you're leaving your husband and going out with your soulmate. How did you know you were destined? Okay, have it your way, she said. You can make something cheap out of it if you want. You don't have to make anything, Tori said. It's cheap as it is. I realize you're stabbing Daddy in the back, and that's between you and him. But how do you envision it with me? Or with Talitha, for that matter? I love you both, darling. That won't change, Tessa hastened to assure her. I still love you, Dax, it's just. She couldn't finish. So you claim to have feelings for me, Tori said. And how do you think I'm going to feel about you? How do you think Talitha will feel about me? I know you're upset, Tessa began. You're going to have to accept that nothing in our relationship is going to change, Tori. You're going to love Charles once you get to know him better. I'm not going to get to know him, Tori hissed. I don't want anything to do with some jerk who hit on a married woman. I'm going to tell Talitha about it, too. Something has already changed in our relationship. All my respect for you is gone. I'll see you very rarely. If you ever bring that piece of shit to me, I'll spit on him. Tori, I know. You don't know shit, Tori hissed. I've never been so disappointed in someone in my life. You've ruined everything. God, I hate you, Mom. Tessa looked at me helplessly. Dax. Don't look at me, I told her. It's on your conscience. I think the full extent of what she'd done began to dawn on her as she shifted her gaze from one of us to the other. Tori clutched at my arm. Let's go, Daddy. I don't want to be around Skankenstein. Let's go get Talitha. Tessa let out a small cry of horror at the bad name her daughter had given her, but I was already being led up the deck steps by my very pissed-off daughter. She practically dragged me to her car and sat me in it, even opening the door for me. I felt like I was moving in slow motion. Talk about a shock. I must have been an ignorant idiot. Tori got in the car, started it, and looked at me. Daddy, it's going to be okay, she said. I know you're floundering here, but for the foreseeable future, I'm going to make it my mission in life to make sure the person I love most in the world gets through this and is happy. Now buckle up, it's the law. I buckled up and it felt good. Tori had always driven like a bat out of the underworld, and she added some venom to it. When she got her bachelor's degree, we asked her what she wanted as a graduation present. She wanted a car, and a specific one at that. A 2017 Audi R8 V10 Plus Spider. We could afford it, and she deserved it. She worked hard, graduated second in her class, was accepted into graduate school, and we were very proud of her. As always, when I was traveling with her, I held on to everything I could. Jesus, baby, I complained. You're going to kill me, and you won't have to worry about this foreseeable future thing. She laughed, as she always did, and didn't slow her step a bit. It was about 10 miles to the apartment she shared with Talitha, and I know it didn't take us 10 minutes to get there. The girls were polar opposites. Not in looks, in that respect they were almost twins, but in personality. It always amazed me that two children with the same parents, raised in the same home, could be so different. Tori was energetic, always on the lookout, always talking and just sparking with energy. Talitha was quiet, loving, very affectionate, and the only time you saw the same energy in her as Tori was in sports. She played softball and was a dynamo on the field. Talitha was home and she squealed when she saw me, slid onto the couch and patted it for me to sit next to her. Hey Daddy, what are you doing? She wrapped her arms around me and snuggled against my side, while Tori took the same position on the other side. Hi sweetie, it's been a hell of a day. Oh, those huge blue puddles looked up at me. How's it going? You're not going to believe this, Tori said. Sorry sis, but you know how I went after Daddy's Jack? Talitha nodded. Mom was home when I got there, and there was a truck full of stuff in the driveway. She told me she was leaving Daddy and moving. What? Talitha was stunned, it was obvious. You're kidding, right? I pulled her against me. I'm afraid not, baby. What did you do? She asked. My feelings were a little hurt. Tori had asked me exactly that. Why did they think I'd done something? He didn't do a damn thing, Tori hastened to say. It was all Mom's doing. She met someone, some Charles she just knows will love. What? How? Are you sure? You could have missed. Tori interrupted her. I knew you were going to say that. I wrote it down. She pulled out her phone and turned on the recording for Talitha. Once again, a polar opposite reaction followed. Talitha began to cry and, without waiting for the drama to end, burst into heartfelt tears. Tori moved to her other side and we made a sandwich for Talitha, hugging and stroking her while she cried for her broken heart. I could feel tears streaming down my cheeks and Tori was wiping her eyes too. What? What are you going to do, Daddy? finally managed Talitha. I have no idea, I said. What can I do? She's leaving. I can't make her stay. I'm not sure I'd want to even if I could at this point. Talitha, what are you going to do? Asked Tori. I'm going to talk to my mom, she replied. I know you guys heard it straight from her lips. I need to hear it for myself. I know the tape isn't lying. If she tells me what she told you guys, I'm going to be really mad at her. I already am. I'll also be deadly sad. I know, doll. I'm still in shock. I'm not, Tori said. Daddy, you need to talk to a lawyer to defend yourself. Jesus, Tori, just listen to yourself, Talitha said. Protect myself? This is Mom we're talking about. So Mom, the woman we've known all our lives, suddenly decides she needs to separate from Dad, gets involved with some scrappy dude, and you don't think she's capable of all sorts of other unscrupulous behavior, said Tori. Yeah, I know what you mean, said Talitha. It's like the Twilight Zone, Tori. I know, sis. It is, but we need to deal with it. Is she still home? Asked Talitha. As far as I know, I replied. But I have no idea how long she'll be there. Talitha stood up. I'll go over there and talk to her, she said. Meet me for dinner? We agreed on a place and time, and she picked up her bag and left. Tori pulled herself close to me, and I put my arm around her. For a few minutes we sat in silence, each immersed in our own thoughts. Daddy, do you know any lawyers? She asked. I snapped out of my reverie. Yeah, I guess I do. But I don't know any that handle cases like this. Call someone you know and trust and ask them to refer you to them, she said. I couldn't believe it had come to this. A few hours before I had been fat, dumb, and happy. Now I was talking about calling a divorce lawyer. This was the mother of all curveballs, and she had a wicked hook. I knew a bunch of very influential attorneys. Some of them were my university colleagues, and I even knew some government lawyers. Tori and I brainstormed and came up with a name, and he recommended several names, one in particular. Her name was Amanda Sloan, and I talked to someone in her office, made an appointment, and got a list of things I needed to do and bring to the meeting. I needed to go home to pack all the things I would need for the reception the next day, so Tori drove me home. She packed for herself and Talitha and informed me that they would be staying with me for the foreseeable future. I objected that they didn't need to do that, but she was adamant. I knew it was best not to argue with her since she had made up her mind. I needed to get all my financial information together, and she helped me. I worked on the investment accounts and gave her the login details for our bank. Daddy, you're not going to believe this, she said. What, honey? You have $50 in a checking account and $1,000 in a money market account, she said. Is that enough to keep you from going below the minimum? What, yes, I think that's the minimum, I said. But we should have a lot more than that. Mom must be making some really nasty moves, she said. Are you going to be okay? Yeah, I'll have to move some money around, open a few different accounts, I guess. I have money at a credit union that she doesn't have access to, and I'll probably use it. But that's pretty cold-blooded, Tori. Really? I think it's illegal, Dad. I don't think it would be good for her. You'll have to ask your lawyer. We met Talitha for dinner, and she was very shaken by the conversation with her mother. I had to hear it from her, she said. I'm sorry, and I knew you were telling me the truth, but some things you need to hear for yourself. You're not mad at me, are you? No, baby, I understand, I told her. Tori gave her a hug. I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't there either, she said. What are you going to do, Tolly? Mom has a fantasy about getting you and me together so we can meet Charles, she said. We'll love him. I told her that not only was I not going to meet Chucky Boy, but that I didn't really want to meet her. But she lied to you guys. About what? Asked Tori. She cheated, I made her tell me. I told her that if she lied to me, I'd find out and I'd never talk to her again. She was having fun with a guy. I'm sorry, Dad, but I don't want anything to do with her. Don't apologize at my expense, I said. Hell, well, I guess we know now. I don't want anything to do with her either. That wasn't entirely true. I was definitely not okay and my emotions were all over the place. Grief, sadness, bewilderment, yes, anything. But the predominant one was anger. I was pissed off to the max and everything else took a back seat. I was on a lawyer's hiatus. Tori and Talitha drove me to her place and waited for me. Amanda Sloan was a tense and taciturn woman. She scared the hell out of me, or would have if she hadn't been on my side, which she was. In 2 days, she drew up divorce papers, put a restraining order on our finances and ordered Tessa to pay back every dime she took. Neither of us could transfer or spend money or move possessions except for normal day-to-day expenses. Because of this, Tessa called me. Why are you being so difficult, Dax? What do you mean I'm being difficult? I asked. I don't want to talk on the phone, she said. I'll come over. She seemed a little shocked to see Tori and Talitha. Girls, why are you here? She asked. I wanted to talk to your father alone. We live here, Talitha said. We don't want Daddy to be alone, Tori informed her. Don't worry, we won't stay since you're here. They grabbed their bags and left without a word to Tessa, who looked like she wanted to say something but changed her mind. You said you wanted to talk, I reminded her. What did you want to say? She sat down across from me at the bar with a sigh. Dax, I don't want this to be any more complicated than it has to be. I still love you, I just need to be with Charles. We can be friends, we have daughters who need both parents. I have nothing to do with your relationship with the girls, I told her. You'll have to deal with that. Friends? I don't think so, Tessa. I don't have any friends who treat me the way you do. Hell, I don't even have enemies like you. Why did you get that court order? She asked. I was just taking money to get settled and pay my moving expenses. Well, half of it was mine, I told her. Maybe more than half, but we'll put that behind us. You have a job, Tessa, you make good money. Yeah, but along with your job, you have accounts at the state credit union, she said. Yeah, and you've never contributed a dime there, I told her. As long as we were together, everything was ours. Now I have to think about what's yours and what's mine. Let the court sort it out. I thought you said Chucky Boy was a roller skating enthusiast. She wrinkled her nose. Stop acting childish, Dax. His name is Charles. You think I care what you think? I asked. I'll call him and do whatever I want. Is that all you have to say? No, it isn't. I want to talk about the girls. What did you say to them? I didn't say a damn thing, I told her. Tori was here, remember? She recorded your speech and showed it to Tally. The only person they talked to was you. You must have said something to them, she said. They wouldn't have been so angry if you hadn't. Listen to yourself, I said. Jesus, Tessa, you dropped a bomb on all of us. They're smarter than any of us. They don't need me to tell them bullshit. They can see for themselves what you've done. How long has this been going on, Tessa? Why didn't you ever tell me you were unhappy with me, with us? We could have tried to make things right. She looked a little wistful. I wasn't unhappy, she said. Haven't you ever met a man, Dax, who knew immediately that he was important to you? Did you know that instant attraction? Like two magnets that are attracted to each other? Yes, I did, I told her. I met you. She couldn't look at me. Can't we just move on, Dax? It doesn't have to be bitter and angry. We can still be friends. We've loved each other for too long to give it all up. We can, I said. The problem is that I don't want to be your friend anymore, Tessa. What's more, I almost never want to see you again. It's a big city. After the divorce, I doubt I'll have an excuse to talk to you again. That's not true, she said. The girls will have their own things to do. Graduations, games, and for Talitha, weddings. Life goes on, Dax. I guess so, I said. I'll do what I have to do. I'm still the same person, she said. You used to like me. No, I didn't, I replied. At least if I did, I never really knew you. I'm done with you. You can leave. No, I'd rather leave. Lock the door behind you. I grabbed my keys and jumped into my Jeep. I drove to the river, parked, got out of the car, and leaned against the front, trying to find my calm and find my center. I stood there for about half an hour, and then a voice brought me out of my reverie. Hi, Daddy. It was Talitha. Hi, doll. How did you find me? Yeah, we all have the family location feature on our phones, she said. You insisted on your own, remember? I laughed. Yeah, insisted, now that I think about it. I don't think I've used it since you were 18. She slid into me and took my hand and put it on her shoulders. Her small, warm body pressed against mine, and I felt comfortable. It's beautiful here, isn't it? She said. I like just looking at the river, listening to the ducks. Yeah, I said. I don't want to interfere with your feelings, but what did Mom say? She asked. I sighed. She just wanted to know why I was making her give the money back. She wants us to be friends. I told her we weren't, actually. But she said we'd have to be together on things involving you and Tori, so I'd better get used to it. She was silent for a moment. I don't think you'll have to worry about that, she finally said. Tori and I have talked a lot. Neither of us is going to invite her to any of our get-togethers, Dad. I squeezed her lightly. Are you sure, doll? She nodded, her hair spreading across her face. Yeah, I'm sure. Not that we miss her and wish she was different, but it's not something I'm going to go through, Daddy. Yeah, I get it. Let's call Tori and ask her if she wants to meet us for Mexican food, I said. She was fine with that, but Tori couldn't make it. She had a project at the university, so it was just me and my baby girl. It was all pretty predictable. Everyone knows people who have gotten divorced if they haven't experienced it personally. We heard the stories even if we never thought it would happen to us. There were many meetings, conversations, and eventually, we settled the details and the divorce went through. The girls stayed with me for 2 weeks before I insisted that they move back to their apartment. They both objected vehemently, but I needed them to get their lives straightened out, back to their old ways. Look, I told them. I'd be happy if you both lived here for the rest of my days. I never wanted you to move out, but you did. I understood why, and I still do. Things have changed for me, but they haven't for you. You have your own lives. I hope there will always be room for me in them, but I want you both to remain you. Do you understand? Yes, Daddy, Talitha said. We don't want you to be lonely. Well, then call me. Come over any time. Say you want to go out to dinner, ask me to go out with you. Do what you've always done. They sniffled a little, and I gave them a long hug. I get it, Daddy, Tori said. I know you're right. They continued to keep me informed about their lives, and the day the divorce was final, they came back and stayed with me for another week. I had no idea what was going on between them and their mother, and they never mentioned her. I continued to study, took a few more papers and extra classes. I missed being married, missing having someone to snuggle up to at night, someone to take care of, someone to do little things for. When I woke up in the night to turn around and cuddle my wife, the empty bed usually brought me to my senses and the longing was crushing. Gradually, I got better. It took a year before I realized it, then too. Tori had gotten her master's degree and was working on her doctoral dissertation. Talitha got her bachelor's degree and put her studies on hold for a while. She went to work for a mortgage company and seemed to be thriving. Tessa interfered in our lives from time to time. She showed up at Talitha's graduation and made a scene. She overheard the girls mention that we were going to celebrate and insisted that she was coming with us. "Mom, are you sure you shouldn't hurry back to Chucky Boy?" said Tori. She frowned and looked like a storm cloud. "Charles and I aren't together anymore," she announced. "Oh, that's too bad," Talitha said. "When did this happen? If you were talking to me, you'd know it's been 18 months. "Well, we've been busy," Tori said. It was better than most comedy shows. I snorted and Tessa threw me an angry look. We all arrived in different cars, so we drove to the barbecue where we had arranged to have dinner. We managed to get an extra chair for Tessa, but the girls made it clear they didn't want her sitting there. She didn't stay long after dinner, and I was flying to Tarawa the next day to discuss plans for the resort. I was a consultant on the project and decided to participate as a shareholder. It was a beautiful place, beautiful ocean, great beaches, and I decided I would spend a lot of time there. I went to a few clubs, met a few people, danced with some lovely ladies, got lucky twice, and came home refreshed. I decided it was time to come out of my shell and start living again. The thought crossed my mind that I was going back to California for the vacations. I was born and raised there, and I wanted to wander around the old neighborhood, see how things had changed, maybe meet some of the people I went to high school with, and see how their lives had turned out. I invited the girls over, but they had too much to do to find the time. We had a motorhome, and I decided I would take it. We hitched a little Wrangler to it to drive around the neighborhood. I serviced everything, stocked up on everything we needed, and hit the road. It was a lot of fun. I stayed at campgrounds, went to all sorts of events, met lots of people, mostly couples who were doing the same thing. Being single was kind of dreary, but what was. It took me 3 weeks to get there because of all the stops, but I found a place, got settled, unhooked the Wrangler, and was ready to sightsee. I spent 3 days driving around Ventura, Santa Barbara, and Ojai. Things had changed, but not so much that I couldn't get my bearings. I was sitting outside the Coffee Connection coffee shop on Robla in Ojai, looking through the newspaper, and noticed a small commotion. Some Karens were trying to get inside without a mask. Yeah, they were a pain in the ass, but I figured after 2 freaking years everyone knew what was up. Several people waited to get inside, but Karen didn't move from her spot. One woman gave up in disgust and walked over to the tables. She sat down and pulled out her cell phone. I guessed she was waiting for the riot to end. She looked very familiar. I knew I'd seen her before, but I couldn't place her. It wasn't until Karen finally left and the woman went inside for coffee that I realized. It was watching her walk that jogged my memory. Jacinta de Leon, I remembered. How could I have forgotten? She had moved to Ojai when I was in 3rd grade. I wasn't much for girls, of course, but she got a desk in the next row right across from me, and she met my gaze as she walked back to her desk. I'll never forget those eyes burning huge brown, so dark brown, almost black. She smiled at me, white teeth flashing and lighting up her face. I was never the same. My idea of girls had flipped 180 degrees, and she had become magical. She sent me a note when we were working on an assignment. It only said hello in her name. I wrote mine on another piece of paper. I wanted to keep the one she gave me. We had one recess, and I was drawn to her like a magnet. I had a soccer ball, and we kicked it around on the playground. She played soccer much better than me, and that never changed. She was the most athletic girl I'd ever met, played soccer all through high school, and I was fascinated. It turned out she lived only 3 blocks away, and my house was behind hers. We walked home together every day, and she became my best friend. All through high school, we sat together in the cafeteria every day, tried to coordinate our schedules as much as school allowed, and by the time we moved on to junior high, I was madly in love with Jacinta de Leon. Unfortunately, the feeling was not mutual. I was her best friend, and I was firmly attached to her. I suffered in silence, too awkward and too afraid of ruining what we had as friends to convey to her my thoughts, which I always left unspoken. I gritted my teeth when her boyfriend of the month joined us at lunch, watched her dance with everyone at school while she always made sure I got one or two. One day, we were sitting in my room playing cribbage and she asked me, "Dax, why don't you have a girlfriend?" There was no way I could answer that question, since I couldn't tell her that the girl I wanted didn't seem to notice me, so I just stammered, horribly embarrassed. "I'm going to help you," she announced. "What, how? What do you mean?" managed I. "You'll have to wait and see." She was cryptic, but it soon became obvious. Soon a string of her friends appeared on the scene. She had some beautiful friends as well. We remained best friends until she moved to Los Angeles and I moved to Texas. I didn't see or hear from her for several years. Then she showed up, and the years have been kind to her. That sultry, smoldering girl turned into a sultry, smoldering woman, but there was a kind of airiness about her. One could tell by looking at her that she was minding her own business. She was elegantly dressed, a beige one-shoulder, figure-hugging dress, obviously silk and very stylish. Black shoes with a low heel emphasized her gorgeous legs, which were 3 inches above her knees. I watched her flipping through her phone while sipping her coffee, and suddenly she stopped. It was as if she sensed I was watching her. I quickly lowered my gaze to my iPad so she wouldn't think some creepy stalker was looking at her. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed her look back and suddenly there was a squeal of delight. "Oh my God, Dax, is that you?" I looked up and saw her heading towards me. I stood up just in time to catch her as she lunged at me. She almost knocked me down. I remembered that this was how she greeted me when we hadn't seen each other for a while, our whole lives. "Geez, Dax, it feels like it's been 100 years. What are you doing here? Are you alone? Is your family with you? Oh my God, I can't believe it's you." My chest was in danger of burning from the coffee she was still holding, and I disentangled myself from the predicament. "Here, sit down before you scald my stomach," I said. She laughed, sat down on the bench and pulled me to her, pressing herself against me and wrapping her arms around my waist. I put mine on her shoulders and the years seemed to melt away. Dax and Jacinta, best friends, just like back then in 5th grade when we sat on the bench in the cafeteria. "Why are you here?" she asked again. "How long have you been here? How long are you here for?" "Give me a chance, Jacinta," laughed I. "You never let me talk." She giggled. "Okay, I'll just sit here and you talk." "I have a van," I told her. "I'm leaving on a tour of the country and I just wanted to see the neighborhood. I've been here for 3 days and I don't have a schedule." "But why are you here? Last I heard, you were in Los Angeles." A shadow ran across her face and then disappeared. "I moved here 3 years ago," she said. "I have a real estate office here and business is booming." "Are you going to stay for a while?" "I'd love to chat with you." "What are you doing tonight?" She hadn't changed a bit. She made me smile both inside and out. "I don't have any plans," I told her. "I get up every morning and decide what I'm going to do today." Dax, I know you're married and have kids," she said. "Is your wife with you?" It was my turn to hesitate a little. "I'm divorced, Peach. It's a long, boring, and painful story." "I don't have time for long, boring, and painful stories right now." She bestowed one of her dazzling smiles on me. God, she was gorgeous. "You're taking me out to dinner tonight," she said. "I have a fashion show in 20 minutes. Give me your number." I did, and she immediately texted me. "Save me in your contacts," she said. "I'll send you a text with the time and my address." Do you only have a van? No, I have a Jeep that I tow, I said. Okay, you can drive, she said. I've got to run, Dax. God, it's so good to see you. I can't wait for tonight. Put on a shirt with a collar. She had always stirred up a storm of emotion in me, and that hadn't changed one bit. I wandered around the store and remembered something. Jacinta adored turquoise. She'd been collecting it for as long as I'd known her. I wondered if she still loved it. I was reminded of this when I passed by a store that sold handmade turquoise and silver jewelry. I went in and made my purchases. The woman who made this jewelry was very talented. There was a heavy silver arm bracelet with a large stone, and to it was a dainty little ankle bracelet with stones attached to it, making a single set. I took it and asked for it to be wrapped. I hoped Jacinta was still collecting them. I went back to the parking lot, used their services, put on black slacks and a pink button-down shirt, spritzed on some cologne, and felt more ready than ever. She texted me her address and I pulled out my iPad to look up directions. When I got there, I was shocked. It was the old part of Ojai, and it had a great location. It had gardens, black wrought iron fencing, gates, a guest house over the garage, and the house itself was worth millions. It was old, stuccoed, 3 stories, and I felt intimidated. I parked on the street, honked at the gate, and they let me in. I walked past fountains, a riot of flowers, a large koi pond, and walked up to the front door. In front of the garage, I could see a green Jaguar E-Type from the late 60s. There were mature avocado trees growing everywhere, and it was a damn beautiful place. I marveled at how well this realtor was doing. The bell made an impressively deep and ringing ding-dong sound, and when she opened the door, I was paralyzed. She saw the look on my face and giggled. "Am I coming through?" she asked. I managed to thaw enough to speak. "Don't get caught up in compliments, Jacinta. You know how you look. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." It was the right answer. She threw herself on top of me and hugged me tightly for a long minute. "God, it's so good to see you, Dax. I've missed you so much." "Hey, I brought you something," I said. She looked in the gift bag, dug through the fabric, and pulled out a box. Opening it, she let out a squeal of delight. "I can't believe you remembered." "Let me get the bag," she said. I booked us a room at the boathouse in Hendry Beach. She walked into the house and I looked around. The entryway had a spiral staircase, seemingly marble, that went up to all 3 floors. A tall grandfather clock stood between 2 of the windows, and a huge chandelier hung from the ceiling that looked like it had been decorated in gilt. Everything here had a luxury feel to it. She returned a few seconds later and took my hand as we walked toward the gate. "Are you sure you want to take my Jeep?" I asked. She laughed. "What, you think I'm too good to drive a Jeep?" "I'm still me, Dax." I had to chuckle. "Well, it looks like you're too well dressed for a Jeep, and damn, Jacinta, from the looks of this place, you're pretty well settled in." She looked up at me and giggled, her face brightening and her very white teeth gleaming. "I've done well, haven't I?" "Yes. What are you into, girl?" We got into the Jeep and she typed the driving directions into her phone. "Well, right now I'm finalizing a real estate development deal on Lake Casitas," she said. "As soon as I get approval from the city, I'm going to get a really big score. The real estate here is just crazy, Dax." "I can only imagine," I said. "Tell me about your life." "Well, it's like a big book," she said. "Hell, how long ago was it? Let's see. I moved to West Covina, became an agent for a big firm, and worked my ass off. I made tons of money, got really lucky, and started my own agency." She hesitated. "I don't have enough time to tell you before we get to the restaurant. You tell me about yourself. I know you have children." "I do," I told her. I asked her to open my iPad, used my face to unlock it, and she flipped through my photo albums. My God, your girls are gorgeous, she said. Is this your wife? Ex-wife, I told her. We divorced almost 3 years ago. I didn't know. I apologize if it's a sore spot. I shrugged. It is. You can't run around and be depressed forever. I'm fine, really, and it doesn't bother me to talk about it. Are you married, Jacinta? I noticed you're not wearing a ring. No, that's the one mistake I've never made. I was in a long relationship, but we never married. I'm somewhat like you, but it's been 4 years for me, and I can't say I like talking about it. Are you close with your girlfriends? Very, I told her. I invited them to come on a trip with me, and they wanted to, but they're too damn busy. I think they'll fly down and meet me somewhere the first chance they get, hang out with Dad for a few days, and then come back again. She smiled at me, dazzling me again. That's so sweet, she said. What about you? Any kids? I asked. No, just me, she said. I always thought I'd make a bad mom. Mine is amazing, but she set the bar too high. I could never be her. We arrived, and she took my hand as we walked inside. After the food arrived, she started chatting with me like she always did when we were kids. The guy I was in a relationship with was a real estate agent at another firm, she said. We talked about having him move in with me, but one thing or another happened, and we never decided to do it. And then, she looked at me seriously. That's the part one don't like to talk about. I reached across the table and squeezed her palm. It's okay, Jacinta, you don't need to tell me. Yes, I do, she said. I was working with him on a major development deal and found out he was cheating me. He went overboard buying a big piece of land and didn't do his homework. Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good, I said. It isn't. Right in the middle of the lot we wanted was 200 acres that belonged to the city. They sold it to him, but it was a gift from the estate that went to the city with the condition that it couldn't be developed for 50 years. It had to remain natural. And so he found himself with millions tied up in something he couldn't sell and couldn't develop. What happened? I asked. He tried to get me to buy the property, told me a bunch of lies about how he was going to get around the problem. It never happened. He pulled some shady deals, tried to bribe people, got caught and went to jail. Fortunately, I always sensed something was fishy, so I didn't look into it until it all blew up. So what did you do? I asked. After Bob went to prison, I sold my agency and moved back home, she said. It was the best move of my life. And look, there you are. Definitely the best move of my life. I was shocked to see you, I told her. She smiled. I was, too. Are you excited? God, yes, Peach. It was such a surprise. I had no idea you were back. I was just planning to wander around the neighborhood, reminisce about old places and old times, and then head to the coast. And how long will you be here? She asked. Well, it's not like I have anywhere to be until the fall semester, I told her. Even then, all my classes will be online, and I have one job in engineering consulting in December. Dax, if I put off all but the bare minimum of meetings, can we go for a walk with you? She asked. Her pretty face flushed slightly. I mean, if you don't want to? If you have plans? I have plans, I said, and her face lowered. And every one of them will be better if I fulfill them with you. Her eyes sparkled. Really? I mean, oh yeah, let's do all the shit you have planned. She was so excited I had to laugh. You haven't changed a bit, Jacinta. Oh, but I have changed, she said. I've gotten smarter, she lowered her voice to a hoarse whisper. I also keep growing hair in weird places, I laughed out loud. After that, we caught the attention of the other restaurant patrons with our antics. It was so much fun to spend time with this amazing woman. She was funny, incredibly intelligent. As I walked her to the door, she chatted non-stop, making plans about when and where she might go with me. At the door, she gave me a hug, pulling me tight against her and left. I swear I spent the next 2 weeks having the time of my life. Only with my girls did I get that kind of pleasure. Jacinta was like a breath of fresh air. I didn't realize how familiar my life with Tessa had become. I became comfortable, relaxed, and I guess inertia took over. Maybe she felt that way, but it was exciting and new. It wasn't exactly new. It was like when I was a kid, walking home from school with my best friend, who happened to be the beautiful girl I loved, and life was sparkling and new every day. I wondered how long it would last if the new sparkle would fade and everything would become ordinary. I began to notice things. I've never been the most sensitive guy in the world and probably didn't notice many things, but this one was special. I started to notice the way Jacinta was looking at me. Those huge brown eyes with flecks of gold and green turning golden honey in the sunlight looked at me in a way I had never seen before. The 2 weeks I had promised to stay had turned into 3, and I had no intention of leaving. Jacinta never mentioned what I said about the 2 weeks, and she didn't talk about me leaving either. We were together almost every day, and she always specified when we would be together before dropping me off or dropping her off. It wasn't until it had been almost 2 months we had been antique shopping all day, and she invited me to come in when I dropped her off that she surprised me. We were sitting snuggled up against each other on her couch. Some old kung fu show was on the TV that neither of us were watching. We were sipping a very good single malt, and then I noticed that she hadn't said anything or answered me for a minute. I turned around to see if something was wrong, and she was looking up at me, her eyes liquid. I squeezed her and asked, "Is something wrong, Peaches?" "No, yes, maybe," she replied. I laughed. "Well, that certainly clears things up. Dax, I need to tell you something to ask you." She hesitated, inhaled deeply, and exhaled with a sigh. "Dax, we've been in touch for a while now. I think you're staying just for me, don't you?" "Yes," I told her. "Why?" "That's what I need to know." "Do we have something going on, Dax?" "I mean, we're just old friends, and you're just spending time with a friend?" "Well, that's how it started," I began. "What do you think is going on?" "It's more than friends for me, Dax. I mean, I remember all the good times, how much I loved you, and you're still the guy I loved back then, only even more so. Why didn't you ever ask me out, Dax?" "Ike Jesus, Jacinta, you were my best friend. I wanted to ask you out, believe me, but I was afraid it would be weird, especially if you didn't want to go out with me and I'd lose you. I couldn't take that risk." "It wouldn't have been weird," she said. "I wanted you to ask me out, Dax. I tried everything I could think of to get you to pay attention to me, but you never did. I would have asked you, but I was afraid too." "Really?" I asked. "Really," she whispered. "I loved you with all my heart, Dax. I just finally accepted that we weren't meant to be together, that you loved me, but not like that." "Oh my God, Peach. You couldn't have been more wrong," I said. "I guess I was just as clueless. You were the girl of my dreams. I used to walk around in a daze all the time, wishing you were mine." "Do you still dream about it?" she asked. "You mean, we laughed together? If you're just leaving and we're never going to see each other again, I think you should leave now, Dax. You make me fall in love with you all over again, and if you don't invest in me here with me, I won't be able to be this close to you anymore." "How long can you stay here, Dax?" "Indefinitely," I told her. "I mean, I can stay, really. I have a job that I have to get out in December. I have a house. I love my girls, Jacinta, and they're a huge part of my life." "I know," she murmured. "We'll get through this if we try, Dax. Let's leave it at that. I want something else right now." "What?" I asked. She led me into the bedroom and we got down to it. I remembered back to when I was in my 20s. It was like I was transported back in time and Jacinta was a time machine. My online classes started and I spent some time teaching, but most of the time we spent together. 1 week followed another, and the first thing I realized was that 4 months had passed. Tori and Talitha kept asking me when I was coming home, and I think they knew something was up. They kept asking what I was doing in California for so long, and while I wasn't trying to hide anything from them, I wanted to tell them about Jacinta face to face. But that was taken out of my hands when one day, while in class, I got an alert on my phone. It was a text from Talitha. "Dad, I'm coming to visit you for a week. I'm flying into Los Angeles on Wednesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Will you pick me up?" "Sure, doll. I can't wait," I replied. I couldn't just pounce on her when she arrived, so I talked to Jacinta. "Kids, Talitha is coming to stay with me for a week." We were in the van, cuddled up on the couch. "Uh-oh," she said. "Dax, you have to tell them. I'm not gonna hide for a whole week. I can't stand not seeing you for a week, and besides, I want to meet them. I know how much you love them. They look like girls I would love very much, and I can't wait to meet them." I squeezed her. "I know. I want you to meet them, too. I was just looking for the right time to talk to them. I was thinking of flying home for the weekend to talk to them. That's not going to happen anymore, so I thought about inviting them to Zoom so we can get to know each other a little bit. Can you handle it?" "Yes." "When do you want to do it?" "I'll contact them and figure out a time," I said. "Monday night, I think. Do you have any plans?" I still managed to get the girls to agree to Zoom with me, even though they were very suspicious of why I wanted to do it and didn't want me to tell them until the last minute. I hooked them up. They chatted with me for a while, and finally, I worked up the courage. "I know I've been mysterious as hell," I said. "I was planning on going back and talking to you, too. You've been hitting on me, and I've been blowing you off. Dad, you're not as smart as you think you are, and we're not as dumb as you think we are," Tori said. "Yes, we are," Talitha picked up on that. "You've met someone, haven't you?" I heard Jacinta giggle there in the kitchen. "Yes, and I really think you'll like him," I said. The look on their faces was priceless. Their jaws dropped, and they sat stunned for a minute. Jacinta was dying, and then Talitha said, "Nah, good daddy, well done. Talitha is coming out, and don't think you're going to be able to pull the wool over us." I could hardly contain my extreme satisfaction at leaving them speechless for once in my life. "As a matter of fact, that's exactly why I wanted to meet you," I said. "Girls, I want you to meet someone. Be nice, okay? Don't let her see what bitches you really are." There were twin mocking snorts. "We're waiting," Talitha said. I called out to Jacinta, and she came in and sat on my lap. "Girls, this is Jacinta de Leon," I said. I pointed to them in turn. "This is my eldest, Tori, and my baby, Talitha." Jacinta waved her hand. "Hello, ladies. Jacinta has been my best friend throughout high school," I told them. "We've kind of reconnected. I'll tell you the whole story, but she's the reason I've been here for so long and probably will be here for a long time to come." "Best friend, huh? Are you out of your mind, Dad? God, Jacinta, you're so gorgeous. Talk about TMI," she laughed. "I can't believe you said that, Jacinta. We're going to really like you, that's for sure. You're just gorgeous, just like Tori said. You know we're the gatekeepers for Daddy, right?" Jacinta nodded. "I'd think less of you if you weren't. I love him, girls. I think I've always loved him, but I let him get away once. It was partly his fault, but I'll do my best to make him a part of my life. But I don't want you to think I'm taking him away from you." "Well, I don't like him being in freaking California all the time," Tori said. "We need to see him too, Jacinta." "I know, and we'll work something out." "I understand, believe me," Jacinta said. "I have things I'm not ready to talk about even with Dax yet. I'm so glad Talitha is coming. I can't wait to meet her and you as well, Tori." Do you think you can make it? I can, Tori said. I'll take the weekend off. I don't want to take your father or any part of him away from you, Jacinta said. I want to be a part of his life and a part of your life too. I want to love you and for you to love me. Tears came to her eyes and the girls realized she was getting excited. Oh, it'll work out, Jacinta, Talitha said. We'll make it work. Tori and I know a thing or two about making things work. I laughed. They don't lie, I said to Jacinta. They're mean little creatures, but my heart belongs to them for life and they're keeping it safe. I believe you, especially about the imps. The girls giggled and engaged Jacinta in conversation, asking her a million questions, telling awkward anecdotes about me, and we used up our entire 40-minute session. When we were done, I leaned back in my chair and just held Jacinta in my lap. Well, these are my babies, I said. Impressions? They're adorable, she said. I love them already. They're great. They have your sarcastic sense of humor, just from a woman's point of view. I pretended to be shocked. Don't look at me like that, she said. You know how you are. When Talitha arrived, Jacinta decided I should pick her up myself, just to get our daddy-daughter groove going, so I picked her up and drove her to the In-N-Out in Hollywood. When she came out of the gate, it took my breath away. I had forgotten how beautiful my baby girl was. She ran up, threw herself at me, and almost knocked me down. She was hard. She wrapped her arms around me and dragged me behind her luggage. Walking beside me, I realized how tall she was. It seemed like just yesterday she was a tiny little girl, but now she had grown and turned into a spectacular woman. How did this happen? Tori was usually a little quieter than she was with other people, but she was never like that with me. She chatted with me the whole way while we ate hamburgers and rode in the Jeep. She wanted to tell me a million things and ask me a million questions. When we got to the van, she still wasn't exhausted. She chided me for not letting her take the bedroom, but when I showed her how the table was pushed back and made a second bed, she was thrilled. We just chatted for a couple hours, and then I told her Jacinta had invited us over for dinner. She was very excited, kicked me out to shower and change in privacy, and when she called me back in, she was ready. I changed and used the campground facilities, and we hopped in the Jeep. Talitha kept talking about the scenery and neighborhoods we were passing through, and the closer we got to Jacinta's house, the more impressed she became. I pulled up to the gate and entered the combination. When we pulled into the house, Talitha looked at me with big eyes. Daddy, your girlfriend lives here? You have a lot more game than I would have guessed. I laughed. She's a major real estate developer. You never would have guessed that back in high school. She's Hispanic, in case you hadn't noticed, and her parents came here from Honduras about 5 years before she was born. Her dad worked in an almond orchard and eventually owned it, and her mom owned a small-to-mall farm when we were kids. She did it all by herself. Wow. Talitha was impressed. We parked and walked into the house. Jacinta was in the kitchen, and as soon as we walked in, she and Talitha froze for a second, looking at each other. I was taken aback, but they both broke out into huge smiles and rushed to hug each other. What are you cooking? Asked Talitha. It smells delicious. Well, our main course will be quite spicy, Jacinta explained. Do you like spicy food, Talitha? Hell yes, Talitha said. Jacinta, you can call me Tally if you want. Tori always does, and Daddy sometimes. Thanks, honey, but I adore Talitha. I can change, but you don't mind? Talitha laughed. Not at all. Tell me more about the spice. Jacinta came over and gave me a quick kiss, then she and Talitha walked over to the stove, standing side by side. Jacinta opened the oven, and a delicious mouth-watering aroma wafted out. These are lamb ribs with lots of spices, she explained. We'll take the meat off the bones and put it on tortillas with pico, brown rice, and refried beans. Dax, you should go out and find avocados. I haven't picked them in a couple days, so there should be plenty. Oh my God, Tally said. You just went and picked avocados? Jacinta laughed. Yeah, I have a lot of trees, she said. I want to go, Talitha said. Do you need help, Jacinta? No, I'm all set. Just need to peel and slice the avocados, she said. You go with your father and I'll put the dishes on the table. I grabbed a basket and Talitha and I walked around the property picking ripe avocados. This is an amazing place, she told me, and Jacinta is even prettier and cuter in person. You're doing great, Dad. I laughed. Thank you, doll. I'm glad you like her. I love her, you know that? Yeah, I can tell, she said. She loves you too. I can see it in the way she looks at you. Dinner was as delicious as it smelled, and sitting at Jacinta's huge table with two of the most beautiful women on the planet wasn't bad either. I volunteered to do the dishes, and when I was done, Jacinta and Talitha were sitting on the couch with Jacinta's laptop, conspiring about something. When I walked in, they closed the laptop and Jacinta patted the couch between them, motioning for me to sit down. "Uh-oh, I see you two are up to something," I said. "What?" said Tally. "He's being paranoid, Jacinta. It happens to old people, I guess." Jacinta giggled. "Hey, we're the same age." "Yeah, but you're not paranoid," Talitha said. "Neither am I said. "But I do know you. You've been plotting against me your whole life." "Yes, but every one of my plots has been for your benefit," she said. "We made plans. They made plans that didn't include me, and we played a couple games before heading back to the van." Talitha kept throwing slanted glances at me until I got nervous. "What?" said I. "I like her, Daddy," she said. "You're a lucky man." "I know, right? You better not let her get away," she said. "It's a good thing I'm here or you'd be in trouble." "Ha, the fact that you're here would probably get you in trouble. But seriously, I'm glad you're here, doll, and I knew you'd like her." For a moment, she sank into thought. "Daddy, how do you think Mom will react?" "Well, since it's none of her business and I don't plan on seeing her or asking her, I don't care," I said. "I see her from time to time," she said. "And so does Tori. What do you want me to tell her when she asks about you? Do you think she'll ask?" She nodded. "Yeah, she always asks." "I had no idea," I said. "Are you lying to her?" She laughed. "No, but I tell her almost nothing." "Almost nothing about you?" "I just tell her he's fine and then tell her about something else." "I guess I'll just tell her you met someone if I have to explain anything." "Do what you think is right," I told her. "I trust you. You're smarter than me." "Yeah, smarter." She giggled and smiled at me the way she'd smiled since she was just a baby and first stole my heart. We had a wonderful week. Sometimes just me and my baby girl, sometimes the three of us, and a few times they went out and did things without me. By the time Talitha got back to Austin, they had bonded and were making plans for the next time we would be together. Tori flew in for the weekend 3 weeks later and her reaction to Jacinta was just as positive as Talitha's. We were on a roll. I stayed at work until it was time to do some consulting. I talked to Tori and Talitha and Jacinta and we agreed to take a little working vacation. Jacinta and I flew to Tarawa and the girls arrived the following evening. I worked during the day while they did tourist stuff and we spent the evenings in a tropical paradise. By the time we left, I had 3 very swarthy girls and Tori and Talitha were Jacinta's best friends. I had to go back to Austin to do some real work in my office. It was going to take about 2 weeks and Jacinta flew in the second weekend. The girls picked her up Friday morning and she spent the day with them until I left. We met for dinner and Jacinta stayed with me. Sunday night we were going to take the girls for a walk and unfortunately their mother chose that day for one of her infrequent and unscheduled visits. She was well aware that if she tried to warn them in advance, they would be busy, so she always tried to catch them off guard. When Jacinta and I arrived, she was at their apartment. It was awkward as hell. Tori introduced Jacinta as Daddy's girlfriend, and you could see the shock on Tessa's face. They tried to escort Tessa out by telling her we were going on a date, but she wouldn't budge. "So how did you meet Dax?" she asked Jacinta. Jacinta smiled. "Oh, I was seated across from him in math class," she said. Tessa looked dumbfounded. "You're both taking the class?" she asked. I laughed. "No, we were 10 years old each." "You've known each other since you were 10? Tessa was puzzled. "How come I've never heard of you or met you before?" "We kind of lost track of each other," Jacinta said. "We only met again this year." Tori interrupted this pleasant scene. "We'd love to stay to chat, Mom, but we have plans." Tessa snorted unhappily, but Tori firmly escorted her out the door. The look on her face would have made milk curdle. "I'm sorry," Talitha said to Jacinta. "I know it was awkward. She came in about 5 minutes before you and didn't want to leave." Jacinta laughed. "That's all right. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Since I have my place in your lives, I'll be there for you." Over dinner and afterward at home, where the girls took us, we had a long conversation. I think the subject had long occupied all our thoughts. But no one wanted to discuss it. Talitha started it. I think she and Tori conspired and Talitha was chosen to be the spokesperson. "Daddy, what are your immediate plans and what are your long-term plans?" "About what, doll?" I asked. "Well, I mean, do you plan on living the rest of your life in a van in California, or do you have something in mind?" I laughed. "No, I don't plan on living in a van for the rest of my life. Jacinta and I haven't talked about the long term." "Do you mind if we hang out here while you talk about it?" asked Tori. I looked at Jacinta. "I don't mind," she said. "I know how much your father means to you. I know how much you mean to him. You also know that I love him and I'm not going to let him go." Tori nodded. "Yeah, we know that. We don't like that you live so far away from us," Talitha said. "Dad, I talked to some people I know at work in Jacinta and I talked about it, too. I'm going to get my broker's license and she and I are going to start a real estate business here." I looked at Jacinta. "Really? You little minx. You haven't said a word." She giggled. "Yes, Dax. I'm going to leave my business in Ojai, but Talitha and I agree that it's a huge market opportunity and I have an idea." "Well, the girls and I kind of came up with it together." "I'm all ears," I said. "I don't know what you want," she said, "but I want you all and always. I want you to live with me in Ojai 6 months of the year. I'll hire an office manager and we'll spend 3 months of the year here. Talitha will handle most things in our business. Sound good?" "Yes, it sounds, but that's only 9 months," I said. "The other 3 I want to spend on Tarawa." It was unexpected, but I was in love with the place. As the owner of the resort, I could do that, so that's what we did. It didn't quite work out that way because we were regularly interrupted by trips to Austin when we were in Ojai and vice versa because Jacinta needed to take care of business, but that was the general schedule. We didn't let anything disrupt our stay in Tarawa and Tori and Talitha spent a lot of time with us when we were there. When you least expect it, life throws you a surprise. We were in Austin for 3 months and Talitha sent me a picture. "Hey Dad, what's up?" "Studying the inspection schedule for interstate bridges in Ohio." "How's it going?" "Just finished looking at commercial real estate," she replied. "Can you have lunch?" "Late?" "About an hour," I asked. "You can't." "Ikiomi at 1 o'clock?" "I'll be there." I wrapped it up and when I walked in, the hostess took me back to the booth. I was surprised to see another girl sitting next to Talitha. The serving girl took my drink order from me. Dad, this is Campbell Martin, she said. She's my girlfriend. I must have looked like an idiot. My jaw dropped and I know I looked stunned. Campbell was clearly unhappy with my reaction. Her nonchalant bitch face took on an extreme look and she grabbed her purse. Screw this whole thing, Tolly. Let me out of here. I need this shit, she said. Wait, Campbell. Please, began Talitha. Please forgive me. I needed to do something and fast. I never. My surprise is what made me act like a fool, Campbell. I'm sorry for what I did. I never knew. Talitha never told me she was gay. Not once. You two just dropped a bombshell on me and now you take offense that I was caught off guard? It's my fault, Tolly said. I'm sorry I came down on you like that, Dad. Just cool it, Campbell. Campbell is my first girlfriend. I would have told you sooner if there was a reason for it. Why didn't you, Talitha? Did you really think I would love you any less? For God's sake, doll, you have my heart, you know that. She started crying just as the food arrived, jumped up and headed for the restroom. Damn, man, why did you say that? Asked Campbell. Campbell, I don't know you, I said. I guess if you're Talitha's girlfriend, I'll recognize you, but you don't know me either. Just stop feuding and swearing and treating me. It won't help. And seriously, Campbell, don't you think that if you're a lesbian, that's something you'll tell your parents about? I have no idea, she said. I don't have parents. But you don't have a clue either. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't know about parents, but you tell me. If you have a secret from someone, you really love that person, and you don't want to hurt them or make them disappointed in you, even just a little bit, would you tell them something and risk getting hurt? I have no idea, I told her. I don't know what I said or did that made Tolly feel like she couldn't trust me, but maybe I wasn't as available as I should have been. Talitha came back in and applied her makeup, so it wasn't obvious she'd been crying. I grabbed her hand and pulled her to me as she walked by, pulling her close to me. I love you with all my heart, I told her. You're my doll, and nothing in the world will change that. Now go sit next to your girlfriend. She went to sit next to Campbell. I'm sorry, Daddy, Shoo, I told her. It's over. We'll never mention it again. Now tell me how you met Campbell. She smiled. She was a pitcher on the Florida State team. We met when we played in a tournament there. Love at first sight, huh? I asked. Campbell laughed. It was for me. But she had a boyfriend, so we stayed just friends. And where until I got a job and moved here. What do you do? I asked. If that's okay with you. I don't mind, she said. I'm a software developer. She looked at Talitha and rolled her eyes. He's testing me, she said. Will I pass the test? I had to laugh. You're a beautiful woman, Campbell. You don't need me to tell you that. I thought I was being subtle, but I guess you got me. No, if I were your father, you wouldn't pass the test. You're gorgeous, but there's too much about you that is exposed. What the hell is that? Who asked you? Lucky you're not my father. Campbell, you're the one who asked him, Talitha said. She giggled. I like the way she looks, Daddy. I raised my hands in a sign of surrender. That's all that matters, I said. After such a stormy start, the conversation went pretty well, and we parted on friendly terms. Tori came in the next evening to socialize with her old man and dropped a bombshell on me. I told her that I had met Campbell. Tori, did you know about her? I mean, did you know Talitha is bisexual? She sighed. Yes, Daddy. I always knew, and before you start, if you tell me the secret and promise not to tell it to her, I won't snitch on you either, okay? Yeah, I understand, love. How well do you know Campbell? Pretty well, she replied. Tali told me a lot about her in college. She was kind of nondescript. I know she had a steady girlfriend and got caught cheating. Talitha didn't like it very much, and they didn't socialize for a while. Wow, I had no idea, I said. I don't think that's good. Dad, she's a grown woman, she said. Let her live her life. I know that, but if I thought you were involved with some cheating boyfriend? A sudden thought crossed my mind. Tori, you. She laughed. No, Dad. Well, I could be a little nosy under the right circumstances, but if I'm looking for a life partner, it's going to be a guy. We chatted some more and she went home. Jacinta came in and I told her about my day. When I told her about meeting Campbell, she looked a little strange. Oh my God, I said. Don't tell me you knew too. She was getting uncomfortable. Yes, Dax, I did know. Talitha told me she was going to meet with you today and tell you everything. Why am I the last to know important things about my daughter? I asked. You're a man, she said and laughed. Girls feel more comfortable talking to other women. Well, I don't know what to think about that, I said. Do you know she had an old girlfriend and cheated on her? Tori told me, she replied. And that doesn't bother you? Dax, they're 25 years old. What were they when it happened? 19, 20? Jesus, Jacinta. Because she was young, cheating is okay? She looked like she was a little annoyed by that. I didn't say that. Did you make mistakes when you were 20? Yes, plenty, I said. But cheating wasn't among them. Things were a little tense for a few days and then I really got under the hot seat. I told Talitha I was worried about her, especially about Campbell. You know how awful it was when your mom cheated, I told her. She flared up. Yeah, I know. I'm the one who told you, remember? And you think because mom is the way she is, Campbell will be the same? Damn it, Dad, that pisses me off so much. She left and didn't answer any of my pictures or calls. I got both barrels when Jacinta got home that night. What did you say to Talitha? She asked. Why did she tell you? I asked. Yes, she told me. She came to our office and cried. Damn, Dax, why did you have to open your big mouth? Because I'm worried about my daughter. I was infuriated that Jacinta didn't seem to understand anything. You have a funny way of showing it, she replied. No, there's nothing funny about it. It's cruel and mean. Just because you were traumatized by what Tessa did, you have to be so worried about Campbell? She's a sweet girl, Dax. She's changed and you should give her a chance and stop interfering. What do you think you're doing? My voice was raised with anger for the first time since we'd been with Jacinta. You're meddling and she's not even your daughter. She looked at me as if I'd slapped her. You're a jerk, she said quietly. How can you say that to me? She's my daughter. Ask her. I know you have scars, Dax, but taking them out on me or Talitha by saying that to me is just petty and mean. She strode away, her back stiff and angry. I heard her footsteps in the bedroom for another half hour. I sat there steaming, and when she came out she had suitcases. What are you doing? I asked. I'm going back to Ojai, she said. When you get your head out of your ass, call me. Her eyes were full of tears and she could barely speak. I'm not staying here with you when you're in this condition. She walked away and I sat stunned. What the hell? How could this have gotten so aggravating? Why couldn't she understand my point of view? Why couldn't Talitha? I lay idle for the rest of the day and slept poorly that night. Memories of Jacinta's wounded gaze haunted my sleep. In the morning I got up as if in a fog. I ate some cereal, too discouraged for anything else. At 10 the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked out it was Campbell. Damn, she was the last person I wanted to see. I sighed and opened the door. She swept past me into the hallway. We need to talk, she said. I want coffee strong black. I stood there like a dummy. Dax, either you give me coffee or you and I are leaving right here, she said. I'm mad as hell at you, but I get you, man. So do you want to throw up your hands, or do you want to give me coffee and talk to me? I had to laugh. This girl was crazy, stunningly beautiful in her little top and ripped jeans, and she was fierce. Coffee then, I said. Please don't kick my ass, Campbell. She grinned. I can do that, you know. I'm a damn good kickboxer. Somehow that doesn't surprise me, I said. I've got some blue mountain beans from Jamaica. I haven't tried them yet. Would you like to try some? Do you like good coffee? Yes, she said, and I do. I wish I had a coffee grinder. You know, Dax, I've always wanted to own my own coffee shop. Not like a franchise one. She sat behind the bar and talked to me while I ground beans and used the Rocket R58 portafilter to prepare our cups, talking about her dream coffee shop. I sat across from her at the bar and we sipped our coffee. It was delicious and she approved of it. She set her cup down and covered her face with her palms, placing her elbows on the bar. And God, she was gorgeous. Our faces were about 2 feet apart, and her huge brown eyes, so dark they were almost black, never took their eyes off mine. Dax, you're crazy, she said. I chuckled. No doubt, I said, but how specifically this time? Talitha is so upset with you, she said. Me too, for that matter. The thing is, she doesn't understand you. I do. Understand? I wondered, having no idea what exactly it was about me that she understands. I understand, she nodded. Your wife, Talitha's mom, cheated on you. Talitha told you that? I asked. She did. And did she tell you that she was the one who found out and how devastated she was? Yes. She also told me how devastated you were. Okay, what are you trying to say, Campbell? You see your baby, she's with me, and I know what Tori told you about me, what I did. And what do you think? I suppose you think I'll cheat on her, she said. You think I'm going to break her heart, and that makes you feel bad about what your wife did to you. I guess she had me figured out. And what are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to get to know you better and let you get to know me. I'm going to tell you about myself, about what it's like to be me. Okay, you're off to a good start, I told her. Yeah, I'm good. She gave me one of her dazzling smiles, her teeth incredibly white against her swarthy skin. Dax, I know what I look like, you know? I was hit on by men at first, but then by women. I can imagine. You're a beautiful girl, Campbell. Her face brightened slightly. Thank you. I don't know how much Tally has told you about women's college athletics. There are a lot of female athletes out there, especially in softball. I think there were about 10 girls on my team who weren't lesbians. I mean, a minority. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I didn't know any of that, but I believe you. Well, imagine this. I was a sophomore, I hooked up with another girl. She was an athlete. We were together all through sophomore year. I didn't cheat on her, and as far as I know, she didn't cheat on me. What happened? I asked. Well, I was invited to camp. It was very prestigious, Dax. Only elite players were invited there. It was run by 2 softball legends. It was a huge opportunity, and I took it. You played baseball in college, Talitha told me. I did play. I was hardly as good at baseball as you were at softball. I know I was never as good as Talitha. Not many people do, she said, but imagine. Who was your favorite professional player? Probably Cal Ripken, Jr. maybe Don Mattingly, I said. Okay, imagine the 2 of them invited you to a skills camp. How impressed would you be with them? Very much, I said. They were legends. They were my heroes growing up. Well, that's exactly what happened to me, but the script is a little twisted. I was 20 years old, Dax. Here are these two hot women that I've idolized my whole life, and they teach me, show me so many things that make me a better player. Then I realized they're not just interested in me as a player. Do you see where this is going? I think so, I said. That's where you're going to have to use your imagination, she said. I know you're not attracted to those baseball players you idolize, but can you imagine if they were beautiful women? For me, that's exactly what they were. They took me to great restaurants, dragged me to clubs, took me to great music venues. They pushed me to the limit. Tears glistened in her big brown eyes and began to trickle down her face. She was breaking my heart, and I realized how much it hurt, telling me about it. It became clear to me that she was telling me this because she loved Talitha. She realized how much my daughter meant to me, how much I meant to Talitha, and she was opening up to me, showing her vulnerability because she needed me to trust her. I needed to stop this pain because I was causing it myself. I took the tissues from the box on the counter, went around, handed her the tissues, lifted her to her feet and hugged her. At first she was stiff as a steel post and seemed to just bear it. I pulled her against me and spoke softly. Campbell, I'm so sorry. Please, I don't need to hear any more. I understand everything, okay? I'm sorry I made it necessary, and I know how brave you are and how much it hurt you to come here and tell me. Please forgive me. I felt her melt in my arms and she pressed herself against me, sobbing heartily. I just hugged her and whispered to her that everything would be okay, that I would fix everything and that I was sorry I didn't give her a chance. After a while she calmed down and I carried her into the living room to the couch. She snuggled up to me and we talked for a few hours. It was time for dinner and I prepared a meal for her. She helped me by snuggling up to me, and despite all the differences between her, big and small, I felt like I had one of my daughters with me. We drank 2 bottles of wine and she was one of those happy, giggling drunks. She stayed the night, slept in Talitha's room, and in the morning dialed Talitha and asked her to come over to my place for breakfast. When Talitha walked in, we were making pancakes, just chatting amicably about nothing, standing side by side at the stove, and Campbell had one arm around me. Talitha swept across the kitchen and came between us. What are you doing here, Campbell? She asked. What, like, Dad? She came to enlighten your poor dumb father, I said. Doll, I'm sorry for the way I acted. I understand why you love Campbell and I know how much she loves you. Will you forgive me? She clung to me. I love you, Daddy. And I always will, she said. It's easy for me to forgive you. Daddy, I need to apologize to you too. I thought you were just a jerk. We both looked at her. Well, I thought I was and you kind of were. Campbell set my mind right and Jacinta did too. I know you love me and thought you cared about me. You just need to work on your social skills. So do I. I should have confided in you, Dad, a long time ago, and I wish I had done so and returned your calls. With Jacinta, I'm afraid you'll have a little more work to do. I know. I'm afraid I said some very rude things to her. I know. She told me. What? Asked Campbell. She didn't tell me. I told her that Tolly was my daughter, not hers, I said. Campbell made a small clucking sound. I don't think Tolly feels the same way Jacinta does. I think technically you were right, Talitha said. But you're terribly wrong. I'm closer to her than I ever was to my mother. I wish she was my mom and you need to apologize to her. What she said, Campbell smirked. I hope you like the taste of crow, dude, because you're going to eat a whole murder. We all laughed, finished making pancakes and had a great morning. I had a lot to do and there was no point in wasting time. 2 days later, I flew to LA, rented a car, stopped by the flower store and bought all the roses they had. Jacinta wasn't home, so I let her in, arranged the flowers all over the house and was kneeling in the hallway when she walked in. She was a little startled and I managed to tell her. I stuck my head out of my ass. "I'm so sorry, Peach. Please forgive me." She burst into tears, ran across the entryway in her heels and hugged me. She pressed her cheek against the top of my head and all those curls covered me like a veil. "I hate being mad at you," she said. "I'm sorry too, Dax. I know you meant well and I guess I felt like we were all kind of conspiring against you. We need to communicate better, all of us." I ate that crow. We flew back to Austin and went rafting in Colorado with all the girls. That was my family and I decided Campbell was going to be part of my family too. I had a new daughter, a ferocious brown jungle cat, but we were family. They were with us on Tarawa the night I proposed to Jacinta, 3 years later. I initiated them into the plan and they had something to do while we went to dinner. As I got down on one knee near the table before dessert, Jacinta's hand came up to her mouth and she burst into tears. It threw me off balance a little, but I burst forward. She reached out and I slipped on the ring. She lifted me to my feet and threw herself into my arms, still crying like a baby. Peach, I was hoping this would make you happy," I told her. "Not cause these tears of despair." She giggled weakly, snuggling into my shoulder. "I am happy," she said. "I cry when I'm really happy too. It was just a little curveball. I thought I hit it with a swing." Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next